Welcome to The Writer's Dream. I'm Linda Maria Frank, the author of Annie Tillery Mysteries. The Writer's Dream is a forum where authors can talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. If you are a published author, you can certainly be on The Writer's Dream. Please look for my email, which will come across the screen from time to time. We appear on Cablevision, all over Long Island. Please look at your program directory to find out what time. We also air here in East Hampton from the Wainscott studio. Please also look at their program directory to find out when. We are on Facebook and we are on YouTube. So please look us up, The Writer's Dream. Today's guest is Melissa Kuch. Melissa Kuch is the author of The Hypothesis of Giants. It's a YA series, soon-to-be series. The first installment is called The Assumption. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Linda. Very happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. And although you're immersed in your YA series now, I understand that you have, for a person of your age, a pretty long writing career. Would you like to tell us about what's available on Amazon?
Sure. So I have 3 short stories available on Amazon right now. I publish those through KDP Direct, so it's on your Kindles. If you have a Kindle or a Kindle app, you can get those on Amazon. They're called Name Change,
Good old Kindle.
To Secure a Husband, and Cloud Pictures in the Sky, and really very different stories, just so you know, definitely meant something to me at different stages of my life, from dealing with loss, from dealing with falling in love, and also dealing with getting married, having to deal with the whole name changing, which was never fun, but definitely it's a humorous take on it. So I have those available on Amazon right now, and in addition to the short stories, I've also tried a bit of playwriting. So I have a couple of plays that I had produced and performed in New York City in the Strawberry Festival. And
you won a prize, did you not?
I did. They both made it to the semifinals, which was very exciting. Definitely not, especially just the first time really putting my work out there. It was such a thrill to be able to see, you know, your words and your dialogue put to life, and it was just such a wonderful experience, and one of the reasons why I still really enjoy playwriting. But for those festivals, it is a lot where you're basically, you know, casting. You have a lot of, you know, you have to direct. You have to really bring it to life, and it definitely is a lot of work, but it definitely was worth it.
What were the plays about? What are the plays about, I should say?
The first one is was called Tea Under the Lilac Tree, and it's about this woman who, she's a writer. She goes to Florida just to get away from life for a little bit, and she finds out that there's an article printed that she died, and she's very much alive, and she doesn't know who would, you know, create this fake article, and so she finds out that one of her former lovers comes down, and then her husband comes down that she's trying to get away from because he's driving her crazy, and she's trying to put the pieces to who did this, and who's out to get her, kind of. But it definitely was so funny. Johnny May, who's been on 30 Rock and a couple of other shows, was in the production, which was so exciting to be able to work with her. And that was a lot of fun. And the second one was called Mismatched Socks. And this is something every couple has gone through, which is laundry day. And as I can attest to, it's never fun. You have to figure out how we're going to, you know, organize, how we're going to bring this stuff to the laundromat, how we're going to, you know, find time to do this. And she does it, the main character does it to spend time with her husband, make it more like a fun thing to do. But he thinks that when she says, "Oh, get ready for a fun night," he thinks it's a completely different scenario.
I can imagine.
He's caught off guard when she comes in with the detergent and the laundry basket. But it was a lot of fun writing comedy, and I really enjoyed that.
So I was going to ask you, what do you enjoy more, writing about comedy? Because I could see the first play that you described about a woman reading her obit could have comedy elements as well.
Yeah.
So when these plays were produced, did you have to be the director? And
The first one I wasn't. The second one I was the director, just to try something different. You know, I was always working behind the scenes, doing the writing, and wanted to be more at the forefront to have a say as to who gets casted for these characters that are in my mind. But sometimes it's nice to have another perspective and to have a separate director come in and be able to really just to be able to bring my story to life in a way I never would have imagined. And so it was great being able to see both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, it is. I mean, even doing this show, I had to learn all of the aspects of producing this show, and it was an extremely interesting enterprise, plus the fact that I get to talk to all of these authors, and everyone has a different perspective. Everyone has a different story. It's very exciting to see that, but there's a lot of commonality, which as we proceed with the interview, you'll find out that we think of these things very much the same. So that's exciting. You've had an exciting career already, and I started to read your Hypothesis of Giants, and I must say I am really enjoying it. Would you like to tell us about it?
Sure. So this is the first installment of a series. It's going to be a 4-part series, and it basically revolves around the life of Aurora Alvarez, and she's a 15-year-old teenager, secretly in love with the gorgeous, teenager, down the block from her on Wishbone Avenue, and she's, she thinks he doesn't know she exists, so, but that's happening, but he's unfortunately taken. He's with Hattie Pearlton, who is her arch nemesis.
And she is obnoxious.
She is obnoxious. She bullies her. She calls her Aurora Fatty Alvarez. She just is not a nice person. But Aurora, she just takes it in stride. She doesn't try to let it get to her. But she also faces, not criticism, but she feels that she can't live up to her mother's expectations. So, and I think she wants to be someone that she's not. But so she hears this conch shell sound during the sacred hour, which is the mandatory curfew set for their town.
What is because I haven't gotten that far into the story, there seems to be a very political aspect to this story. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so they're...
without giving anything away.
So 15 years prior to when the story takes place, there was a bit of a revolution, and there was this big protest called the Last Straw protest, where religious protesters are still fighting for their right to freedom of religion, but the government in place, which is ruled by the ideal, wants to retract that from the Bill of Rights. They say that religion has caused all these wars, all these problems. It's better just to eliminate it. And they ended up winning the battle. And so this now newly founded government is the Common Good government, ruled for the United States of the Common Good. So now, this story now takes place 15 years after the fact, where now the ideal, along with his second-in-command, Inspector Harold, are the ones ruling, and more very kind of like a totalitarian kind of government where they're ruling it by force. And so Aurora now is in the middle of this, where she hears this conch shell and finds out that she has to ally herself with the love of her life, Jonathan, his brother, Boreas Stockington, who can also hear the conch shell. So she's not happy about that. She would rather, if she had to be allied with someone, she would rather it be Jonathan, but she's stuck with his brother. Okay, but this is where she has to really realize that they're in this together, that they're on this quest to now help a 30-foot giant whose name is Otis reach the Northern Lights.
How did they meet the giant?
Oh, it's they literally fall into this quest where they're in the mysterious ruby red house where they hear the conch shell sounding from, and that's when they go and they sneak in, and it's like an earthquake kind of happens where they sink in through the floorboards and they end up in Otis's lair, and that's where they meet him. And he's more terrified of them than they are of him. He's just like this big fraidy cat, the gentle giant, and he tells them about the prophecy that they're all in this quest to now reach the Northern Lights together. But now they're up against this, Inspector Harold, as well as the Common Good government, who wants to stop them from achieving that goal.
So you've given teenagers a cause to soldier on, sort of, right? Instead of just sitting there with their iPods and whatever. They are now on a
Oh,
crusade.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, this is action-packed. It has, a lot of adventure. It gets, one of those things where they face not only outside conflict, but also conflict from within, where Aurora
Right.
is still facing her own self-doubt.
Teenage angst.
Teenage angst, and
Yes.
Boreas, who can never live up to the expectations of his father, and also, feel like he's second to Jonathan, feeling that kind of, I'm not worthy of this, and so he's in that kind of rebellious phase where he does not want to, be here, but they really, they have to, they realize that they need each other to survive.
I looked at your website and your book trailer, and it shows Candlewick, which is the town where all this takes place, and it's worth visiting your website just to look at that trailer, because not only is your website interesting, but that trailer is very nicely done.
Thank you so
and
much.
to see your conception of Candlewick, a town in the future, it's just very interesting. What motivated you to write, to start a young adult series?
Well, like as you heard from my background, I did a lot of playwriting and comedy and things of that sort. So this was never really a genre I ever thought I would get involved with. It was, I loved reading, of course, the Harry Potter books, Hunger Games, Chronicles of Narnia. So I was always, influenced by those writers. But I never thought that I would ever embark on a series. But when I was doing playwriting, I was working on a play. I ended up going to the Stony Brook Southampton playwriting conference, and just to further my craft and and I worked under Adam Bach, who's an amazing playwright, and he told me to think outside the box. If you are so used to trying one type of writing style, try something new, and especially if you keep finding yourself getting stuck, maybe you need to try something different. And I said, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Because, I had always tried novel writing, but I would always get stuck in a certain place. I wouldn't know how to backtrack. And so I said, you know what, why not? And then I was inspired one night having a dream that I was flying along with a giant. Okay, an idea. Okay, so I told my husband about it, Mike, and he was just like, okay, that's an interesting idea. And then he mentioned something about the aurora borealis. And I said, let me do some research on that. And I found out that the aurora borealis was named by this philosopher mathematician Pierre Gassendi, and he called the northern lights the aurora borealis after Aurora, which is the goddess of dawn, and Boreas, who is the god of the north wind.
That's right.
How interesting. And from there, just like the light bulb went off. I had my characters. I knew this was the direction I needed to go.
Yeah.
And I haven't stopped since.
It's amazing where authors get their inspiration from, the very different places that they get their inspiration. And I've always found that Greek myths are a great place to go, because they are really the original fantasy stories. And all of the fantasy stories we see so popular now, really, if you read them and you're familiar with Greek mythology, they're pretty close. So you hit upon a good thing. Speaking of research, how much research did you have to do this book?
Oh, I did a lot. I research, and I know we spoke earlier, it was not one of my favorite things, but I do love history, and I love, finding out about, Pierre Gassendi, and about, finding out about the Greek gods, and figure, how can I intertwine this with my concept and with my idea of where I wanted this novel to go. So definitely feel that, research is very important. And there's one part in the story where they go into an underwater castle. I won't reveal too much about it, but it was so much fun writing. And I actually did some research where I found out that there is an underwater hotel, and I was trying to figure out how did they make it. I was trying to find out the ins and how I can now tie that into how they created this underwater castle in the Atlantic Ocean.
Sure. Well, that's these are the kinds of things that we get ourselves involved in. And one of the aspects of your book that I really like, because I'm a news junkie and I really am very interested in politics, having been a teacher for many years, I understand that students really, for the most part, don't get very interested in politics early on. This usually happens later maybe high school and college. But the fact that you have a book that revolves around a repressive government based on a revolution that happened based on religious differences is very interesting, because to have kids read a book like this, sometimes that's a hook for them to get interested in their own government. And of course, I'm always on that whole thing about let's get the kids reading, let's get the kids interested in in the world around them. And I think it's wonderful that you've come up with a book that has this kind of depth in it.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I felt so passionate about writing this, because I feel that freedom is something that you should never take for granted.
Exactly.
And the beginning of the story starts off with Aurora talking to her father about the American Revolutionary War, which they're not allowed to teach in the schools anymore. I think it'll have a new mandated
I like her father.
forum. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, I do too. Based off of my own father a little bit. So, but he was, and it's one of those things where living in the United States of America, it's one of those things where people had fought so hard for these freedoms and these liberties. And something that Ben Franklin had said was that to give up a little, your essential liberty is to purchase safety. Doesn't you just deserve, you may not be able to be entitled for safety or liberty. And I think that's one of the things where you should never just give up something that is so true and so important, such as freedom, for something like, oh, well, these, differences are reasons for us to divide ourselves. No, differences should unite. And I think that's really important. And I feel that I really hope that students really do take an interest in learning more about history, because history does repeat itself. And there are times within her history where religions were not, allowed to be practiced freely. Like one of the reasons why America, even was founded was by people who were escaping religious persecution.
So your book really is working on three levels. It's working on the level of teenagers dealing with teenagers, teenage angst, a fantasy story, and actually a historical perspective. So I think that will make for a very interesting series. All right, let's talk about nuts and bolts now. Tell me about how you published.
I published through I always knew I wanted to do an ebook. I knew I had already done the short stories, and I had gone through KDP Direct, and so I knew that was definitely, with Kindles and Nooks, everyone has not everyone, but a good amount of people have an e-reader. And I think it's great, especially when I was commuting to the city on the subways. It's just so convenient to have it in one hand, be able to turn the page, as opposed to, having to let go of the pole and, oh my goodness, falling over. But I still love the hard copy. And I still think that it's one of those things where if I could do it, I would want to still do both. And so I went through CreateSpace.
Yes, well, that's Amazon's.
It's exactly affiliated with Amazon, and
that's Amazon's self-publishing division. Yeah, I went through iUniverse and then went to KDP Direct.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So I did it the opposite way, and I often tell, I do a workshop with Karen Bonet, who's doing cameras today, and we do this workshop called So You Want to Write a Story, and we talk about our journey through self-publishing, and we talk about all of the neat ways that you can get into ebook format, into digital audio, but it's wonderful to have the hard copy, because you can get it into libraries. Some people just really like to have a book, although I do believe that libraries are going to go completely ebook eventually, and some people cry when I say that, but I think it's just a practical consideration. So how did you like CreateSpace?
I did like them. It was they were very, available around my schedule, which is great, especially working full time.
Did you have somebody on the phone that you could speak to?
There was someone on the phone you could speak to.
So you had
you could
like
email,
your own,
or you can talk to someone, and usually it's like they'll call you now, call you in 5 minutes, call you in 10 minutes. So whatever worked best for your schedule. So that was really helpful. And